It had been 3 weeks since the accident. I still remembered the crash, the terrifying stillness that followed, and the way everything around me seemed to blur into a muffled void. The doctors had told me it might take time for the sound to return, but I hadn't expected it to feel so overwhelming. When the nurse came into my room and adjusted the settings on the hearing aid they had given me, the first sound I heard was the beep of the heart monitor. It was so sharp, so distinct. For a moment, I thought I might snap back into the silence. But then there were other sounds. The rustling of the curtains, the soft shuffle of her shoes as the nurse moved across the floor. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed too loud. I couldn't help it. A tear slipped down my cheek. I hadn't realized how much I missed the world's sounds, the noise of life. The clinking of coffee cups, the low murmur of people talking in a crowded room, the laughter of my daughter Jessie when she made one of her corny jokes. It was all coming back, and it was more beautiful than I ever imagined. I pulled myself out of the bed, leaning on the side for support. The doctor had said it would take time, but the noise that flooded back into my world felt like it had been waiting for me. Today, I was going home. Today, I would see Jessie. I had thought about the moment I would walk back into the house 1,000 times. What would her reaction be? Would she be happy? Would she be relieved? I wanted so badly to hear her voice, to feel the warmth of her presence like it used to be. With a nervous laugh, I pulled on my jacket. The sound of it rustling felt too loud against the stillness of the hospital room. I adjusted the hearing aid, the slight feedback in my ear still foreign, but manageable. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. As I stepped out of the hospital, the world opened up. The sunlight hit my face, and the distant hum of cars on the street felt like music. Birds chirped nearby, and I could even hear the faint sound of a dog barking a few blocks over. I paused for a moment, just taking it all in. It was as if I had been living in a dream, and now I was waking up. The car ride home felt like it took forever. Each turn, each bump on the road, it all became so vivid. And then, as we pulled into the driveway, my heart skipped. There it was, my home. And inside that home was Jessie. I could already imagine her running to me, asking how I was, giving me one of those tight hugs that always made everything feel better. I couldn't wait to hear her voice again. As I opened the door, I thought back to the days before the accident, before everything changed. She'd been my rock, my reason for pushing through every challenge, no matter how hard it was. The house smelled like the dinner she would have made, the scent of garlic and fresh herbs, and it brought a smile to my face. I stepped inside, my ears buzzing from the sounds of the world, but it was the sound of her voice that I was waiting for. Dad? Jessie's voice was soft at first, but I could hear the surprise in it, the confusion as she looked up from the kitchen table. "I'm home, Jessie," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to face the world again, the world with sound. As I stepped quietly into the house, the sounds of home felt strange, yet comforting, like I was hearing everything for the first time. The low hum of the refrigerator, the sound of Jessie moving around in the kitchen, the slight creak of the wooden floors beneath my feet. I couldn't wait to see her, to hear her voice again. It had been too long. I paused just inside the door, taking a deep breath. Everything was as it should be, except for the heavy sense of anticipation that was building inside me. Jessie had been the one constant through all of this, the one person I could count on. I hadn't expected her to be here, but I was so relieved that she was. It felt like I was finally going to be able to reconnect, to return to the life I'd had before the accident. But something was off, something I couldn't quite place. As I stood there in the doorway, I heard Jessie's voice coming from the kitchen. She was talking to someone, and for some reason I felt the sudden urge to remain still, to listen. Her voice was soft, almost conspiratorial. And then I heard Chris's voice, a little louder, his words reaching me clearly. "She's so damn trusting, isn't she?" Chris said, his tone cold and calculating. "She'll never know what hit her. Once we get the papers signed, it's all ours." I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Papers? Ours? I felt my pulse quicken as I strained to hear more, each word now like a heavy weight pressing down on me. "You really think this will work?" Jessie asked, sounding hesitant, though her voice still had that edge of determination. "The doctors will go along with it, won't they? We can declare him incompetent, and then we get everything. The house, his savings, everything." I could hardly breathe, My mind was racing, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. They were talking about me, about my life, my estate, and the person I had trusted most. Jessie, my daughter, the one person I thought would have my back. "You've been taking care of him for weeks," Chris continued. "He'll be so confused. One little fake doctor's note, and we'll have him in a home before he even realizes what's going on. We'll be in control, Jessie. All of it." My chest tightened, my throat closing up. I had been listening long enough, but it felt like the world was spinning around me. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, and I wasn't sure whether to scream, cry, or just walk out and leave it all behind. But I didn't. I stayed. I listened. And with each word, my heart sank deeper. "So we just forged the medical evaluation?" Jessie asked, her voice almost matter-of-fact. "It's not like anyone will question it. He can't even hear properly yet, and he's confused half the time. We've got this." Confusion? Half the time? So that's what they thought of me. I was nothing more than a tool for them, a means to an end. They had been pretending to care for me, all the while planning to take everything from me: the house, the money, my entire life. "I'll take care of the paperwork," Chris added. "We'll need to move quickly, though. Once we get the power of attorney, we can start selling the house and getting him moved into the nursing home. We can tell him it's for his own good." The words were cutting into me like knives, each one a deeper wound than the last. I had trusted them both, my daughter and her partner. They'd both played me, and I had no idea how long this had been going on. But I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not just yet. I took a deep breath, making sure my steps were light as I moved slowly into the kitchen. They hadn't noticed me yet. I needed time to process, to think. But I could already feel my resolve hardening. I wasn't going to let them take everything, not without a fight. I stayed hidden, watching as they continued their conversation. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I was determined to stay composed. It was clear now that I needed to take control of my life again, before they could take it all away. For the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what I had to do. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of what I had to do. The house felt strangely quiet, as if it too was holding its breath. I had just heard everything I needed to hear. The betrayal that had been building for weeks, maybe even months. Jessie and Chris had been planning this from the start, but I couldn't confront them yet. Not when they thought I was still the broken, confused man they had been caring for, or rather, pretending to care for. I would play along. Let them think they still had the upper hand. Let them believe they were in control of the situation. I wasn't going to let them know I had heard everything. I stood still for a moment, trying to steady my racing heart. Then I walked into the kitchen, feigning the same confusion I had experienced when I first woke up. I made sure my footsteps were slow and deliberate, like I was just another victim of the silence, as if I had no idea what had been happening behind my back. "Dad?" Jessie's voice was light, almost too light. It was the voice she always used when she wanted to sound caring, when she wanted me to believe everything was okay. But it wasn't okay. Not anymore. "Hey, Jessie," I said, forcing a smile onto my face. "How are you doing?" She stood by the counter, her eyes flicking toward me, as if she were checking for any signs of my recovery. Her eyes softened, but I saw the hesitation there, like she was worried I might figure it out. "We're just trying to sort everything out," she said, her voice too sweet. "You know, making sure you're comfortable. We don't want to overwhelm you." I nodded, pretending to be grateful, pretending I didn't already know what they were really planning. Chris was sitting at the kitchen table, scribbling something on a notepad. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and I saw a flicker of panic in them. It was almost as if he knew I knew, but I didn't let him see my thoughts. "You know, Dad," Jessie continued, "we were talking about some options for your care. We want to make sure you're taken care of properly. It's just, well, you've been through a lot, and I don't want you to feel like you're a burden. We can get everything sorted for you." I watched her, every word she said sinking deeper into me. She was acting like the caring daughter, just like I had always known her to do when she needed something. The charity act, the facade. I could feel Chris watching me now, still pretending to be busy with his notepad. I was certain he was making mental notes on what he needed to do next. They were acting like I didn't understand, like I was still in the dark. But I was in control now. I forced myself to look down at the floor, feigning confusion, like the world was still too much for me to process. "I don't want to be a burden," I said softly, making my voice crack just enough to sell the performance. "I appreciate everything you're doing." Jesse's face softened, but there was a flicker of something else, something that looked almost like guilt. I saw her glance at Chris, her eyes pleading. I couldn't help but smile inwardly. They thought they were so clever, so smooth, but I was one step ahead. "We just want you to be comfortable," Chris said, leaning back in his chair, still acting casual. "We've been looking into some places, you know. You'll be well taken care of. It's just temporary, and after everything you've been through, you deserve it." Temporary. The word hit me like a punch. They were planning to take me out of my own home, out of my life, and they thought I wouldn't even notice. But I was noticing everything. "I trust you both," I said quietly, my voice laced with false humility. "I just want to get better. Thank you." They smiled, as if I'd given them the approval they were fishing for. Chris scribbled more notes on his pad. I noticed he wasn't writing anything important, just random lines like he was making it up as he went along. They were building a story, creating a reality that didn't exist, and they thought they could get away with it. They were wrong. I walked out of the kitchen then, taking a mental note of everything I'd just heard. I was playing my part for now. But when the time was right, I'd make sure they paid for what they had planned. It had been a long, exhausting day. Jesse and Chris left the house for errands, talking about things I wasn't supposed to hear. But that didn't matter anymore. I had already heard everything I needed to. As soon as I heard the door close behind them, I moved quickly. The weight of their betrayal was still fresh, and I could feel the sting of it in my chest. They thought I was weak, that I was just an old man waiting to be pushed around. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I walked to the small office where I had kept important papers, my hands steady despite the rush of emotions swirling inside me. I wasn't going to let them take everything, not without making them pay for what they'd done. My lawyer, Robert Henley, had always been professional, but I needed him now more than ever. The first time I'd met him, I'd come to him for advice on a few business matters. But now I needed him to protect me from my own family. I called his office, my finger hovering over the dial. The phone rang twice before Robert picked up. His voice was a soothing presence in the chaos of my mind. "Henley and Associates. How can I help you?" he asked, his tone calm and reassuring. "Robert," I said, my voice steady despite the situation. "I need to make some changes to my will." There was a brief pause, and I knew he was assessing me, probably trying to figure out if this was just another one of my whims. But this time, it wasn't. I was clear-headed, focused, and I knew exactly what I wanted. "Of course, Thomas," Robert said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "What changes are you looking to make?" "I want to make sure my son, Michael, gets everything," I said, my voice cold and decisive. "I don't trust Jessie anymore. She's been planning to put me in a home, take my house, everything. I want to ensure she gets nothing more than a token amount, $1,000. Robert's voice was quiet but firm. "I'll need you to come in and sign the paperwork. I can also have a few of my associates witness it, just to make sure everything is ironclad. You'll have a copy with you as well." "I'm coming in," I said. "I'll bring everything." After I hung up, I stood there for a moment, just breathing. My mind was racing with thoughts of the future, the life I was about to reclaim. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. Jessie thought she had everything figured out, but she had underestimated me. She thought she could manipulate me. But now, I was taking control. The next few hours passed in a blur. I gathered all the necessary documents, all the papers that would ensure my plan was in motion. When Jessie and Chris returned home, I'd be ready. They'd been so certain of their victory. I could already see the look on Jessie's face when she realized what I'd done. She'd be furious, but it would be too late. The changes were set in stone. My son Michael would inherit everything. And Jessie? She would be left with nothing. As I packed everything up, the weight of it all felt surprisingly light. I wasn't carrying the burden of their manipulation anymore. I was taking control, and it felt right. It felt like the first step in a new direction, one where I was the one in charge. Jessie and Chris were late getting home, which gave me just enough time to take in everything I had done. The will had been changed, the paperwork was in place, and I had taken steps to ensure everything was legally bound. There was no turning back now. It was done. When they finally returned, I heard them before I saw them. Their laughter and casual chatter filled the air, almost like nothing had changed. They walked through the door, talking about trivial things, grocery shopping, the weather, maybe a couple of inside jokes. But underneath it all, I knew the tension was growing, silently, behind their facades. I had placed the updated will on the kitchen counter. The the one document that could completely change the course of their plans. It was the final move in my game, the move that would expose everything. I pretended to be in the living room, sitting quietly, my eyes scanning a book that I wasn't really reading. I wanted to give them time to see it, to react. I wanted them to know that their plan had failed. The sound of the paper rustling caught my attention. Jessie's voice broke through the calm of the room. "What's this?" she asked, her voice sharp with the first hint of unease. There was silence for a beat before Chris's voice joined in, low and confused. "It's a will, but this doesn't make sense." Jessie's breath caught, and I could practically hear the tension in her voice as she began to flip through the pages. "He changed it. This isn't right. He left everything to Michael." A pause, then a sharp exhale from Chris. "So, he cut us out completely?" I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. They hadn't expected this. The sound of papers rustling again filled the air, and I knew Jessie was skimming over every line, realizing the scope of my decision. "He left us $1,000?" she muttered in disbelief, her voice faltering. "After everything we've done for him, for all these months." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Chris's voice dropped to a whisper, but I could hear the fury in his tone. "We need to speed up the plan. We can't let him get away with this. We need to have him declared incompetent, fast. Get a doctor to sign off, forge the medical evaluation, whatever it takes." I could feel the bile rise in my throat as I sat there, motionless, pretending to be oblivious. They thought I couldn't hear them, that I wouldn't know their next move, but I was in control now. Their betrayal wasn't a whisper in the background anymore. It was loud and clear, exposed for the world to see. Jessie's voice cracked. "But if we do this too soon, it could backfire. What if he realizes what we're doing? He'll fight us, and we could lose everything. I can't afford that." I heard Chris scoff. "We'll figure it out. We've always been able to manipulate him. This is no different." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. They were already preparing to go further, to push me aside completely. They thought I wouldn't know, but I did, and when the time came, I'd make sure they would never be able to touch a thing. I didn't move as they continued discussing their plans. I didn't need to intervene. They were already in the trap. They just didn't know it yet. When I was sure they were done, I let the silence hang for a moment before I stood up slowly. Their conversation stopped, and I turned to face them, calm and composed. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice steady. Jessie froze, her face paling as she stared at me, wide-eyed. "Dad, No need for the act, Jessie," I said, my tone cutting through the air. "I've heard everything." Chris shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes flickering to Jessie, then back to me. He tried to regain his composure, but I could tell he was already unraveling. "Dad, Jessie began, but I cut her off, my gaze hardening. "You thought you could take everything from me," I said, my voice measured. "But you didn't count on me listening. You didn't count on me being one step ahead." Chris opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "No more lies, no more manipulation," I said, my voice cold now, the calmness of my tone making the weight of my words even more powerful. "You're done." I could see their world crashing down around them, their plans unraveling as they realized the truth. They had underestimated me. I wasn't the fool they thought I was, and now they had to face the consequences. I hadn't expected Jessie to confront me so soon. The door creaked open, and I heard the familiar sound of her footsteps coming into the living room. She was trying to sound casual, like nothing had changed, but I could hear the undercurrent of nervous energy in her voice. "Dad," she said, her voice too sweet, too rehearsed. "We need to talk about something." I turned, feigning surprise. "Sure, what's on your mind?" She hesitated, then took a deep breath, clearly preparing herself. "I saw the will," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "I don't understand. Why did you change it?" "Why, Michael?" I could hear the panic creeping in behind her words, the sense of control slipping from her. She was trying so hard to act like she didn't care, but I could see right through her. She was scared, and it was about time she was. I kept my voice calm, measured, as I replied, "I made the changes because I've realized who really has my back, and it's not you, Jessie." Her eyes widened, and I could almost see the panic in her trying to hide behind her perfectly constructed mask. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling just a little. "Dad, I've always been here for you. You know that." No, I don't know that, I said, my voice turning cold. Not anymore. Jesse's gaze shifted to Chris, who had quietly entered the room, standing at the doorway with his arms crossed. His face was tense, his eyes flickering with a mix of fear and anger. He hadn't expected this either, I could tell. But now, he was caught in the web they'd spun. "You're really going to do this?" Jessie asked, taking a step closer to me, her voice almost pleading. "After everything we've done for you?" I didn't flinch. "Everything you've done?" I repeated, my tone hardening. "You've been using me, Jessie, pretending to care about me while you plot to take everything I've worked for." Her face flushed, and she opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. She tried to make herself look innocent, to play the role of the caring daughter who was just misunderstood. But I saw through it all. I saw the person she truly was now. "You were planning to send me to a nursing home," I continued, my voice steady. "Selling my house, forging documents, making me seem incompetent, all so you could get your hands on my money. Is that what you really think of me? Just a tool to make your life easier?" Jessie opened and closed her mouth, like she couldn't find the words, but Chris stepped in, trying to defend her. "That's not," he started, but I cut him off. "I heard everything," I said flatly. "I know exactly what you've been planning. I've been sitting here listening, and you've made one thing very clear. You don't care about me. You care about what you can get from me." Chris shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between Jessie and me. I could see the panic setting in. They were both realizing they were on the losing side now. The calm, composed version of Thomas that they thought they could manipulate was gone, and they weren't prepared for this version of me. "You can't just change it like this," Jessie said, her voice rising in desperation. "You don't have a right to do this to me." "Wrong," I said, standing up now, my hands clenched into fists by my sides. "I have every right to do this. You lost that right when you decided to betray me. You're no longer a part of my life, Jessie. You've crossed a line that you can't come back from." Chris tried one last-ditch effort. "You can't just cut us out. We'll fight this. We'll contest the will. You can't make decisions like this on your own." I didn't flinch. "You can try," I said calmly, "but it won't make a difference. It's done, and you're done. Leave, now." Jessie's eyes welled with tears, and her voice trembled as she tried to hold it together. "Dad, please, don't do this. We're family." I felt nothing, not anymore. "You were never family to me, not like this." There was a long silence. Jessie stood there, rooted in place, as if she didn't know how to process what was happening. Chris opened his mouth to speak again, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Leave, now," I repeated, my voice hardening with finality. "You're not welcome here anymore." They both stood there for a moment, staring at me, trying to gauge whether I was bluffing. But they could see it in my eyes. I wasn't, and I wasn't backing down. Slowly, Jessie wiped at her eyes, her pride seeming to collapse around her. "You'll regret this," she whispered, and I almost felt something stir inside me. But then she turned and walked away, her footsteps heavy with the weight of everything she had just lost. Chris followed her, and the door slammed behind them. For a long time, I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the space they had just vacated. The silence felt different now. It wasn't oppressive or lonely. It was freeing. They were gone. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The tension in the air was thick as Jessie and Chris stood in front of me, both trying to figure out what to say. Jessie's face was flushed with anger, her eyes darting between me and Chris, while he crossed his arms over his chest, looking as if he were trying to muster some form of defiance. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me to fight back. But I wasn't backing down. Jessie spoke first, her voice shaky. "Dad, you don't understand. This is for your own good. We're just trying to make sure you're taken care of." I let out a short laugh, the bitterness in my chest spilling into the air. "No, Jessie, you're trying to make sure you are taken care of. Don't think I don't see through this." Chris shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening as he glared at me. "This isn't over," he said, his voice rough. "We'll contest the will. You can't just cut us out like this." I stood firm, my eyes never leaving him. "Try it," I said calmly. "But it won't make a difference. The changes are legal, and they're final." Jessie's eyes filled with frustration. "You're being ridiculous. This is family. We've been here for you, helping you. How can you do this to us?" I shook my head. "Helping me? No, Jessie. You've been using me. You've been pretending to care for me while plotting to take everything I've worked for." Her face twisted in disbelief. You think we've been using you? We've done everything for you. No, you haven't, I said, my voice unwavering. You've done everything for yourselves, and now it's over. Chris opened his mouth, but I held up my hand, silencing him. You both need to leave. You have no claim to my house, my estate, or anything else. You've crossed a line that can't be undone. Jessie took a step forward, her face a mix of anger and desperation. Dad, please, I'm your daughter. You can't just throw me away. This is a mistake. I stood tall, not moving an inch. I'm not throwing you away, Jessie. I'm simply choosing not to let you use me any longer. You've made your bed. Now you'll have to lie in it. Her voice cracked. You're just going to let us go? After everything? I nodded. Yes, I'm letting you go. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. Chris glared at me, his voice rising in frustration. You'll regret this, Thomas. We'll make sure this isn't the end. Don't threaten me, I replied coolly. It won't work. You don't have the power you think you do. You're done. For a moment, it seemed like they were still processing the situation, their minds racing to figure out some way to get out of it. But there was no escape. The trap had already been set. They had no more moves. Jessie's expression crumbled, and she stepped back. You'll never see me again, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I had already made my peace. Slowly, they turned, walking toward the door. I didn't stop them. I just stood there, watching them leave, the weight of their departure settling into the space they had once occupied. The house felt emptier, quieter, more peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The door clicked shut behind them, the sound of it echoing in the now quiet house. Jessie and Chris were gone, leaving nothing but the thick silence in their wake. I stood in the living room for a moment, still, as if waiting for something to shift back to normal, but I knew it wouldn't. Normal had slipped away the moment I'd overheard their betrayal. The house felt different, lighter in a way, but also emptier. The weight of their presence was gone, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I walked through the house slowly, my eyes scanning each room. The living room, where we'd shared so many dinners and conversations that had always left me wondering if they had ever been real. The kitchen, where I had spent so many mornings preparing meals for them, only to realize I'd been serving a family that never truly cared. The hallway where Jessie's childhood photos still hung, frozen moments of innocence and love that I now realized had been taken for granted. It was all empty now, empty of them, but also empty of the love I had always hoped was there. A hollow place that I had filled with sacrifice, with care, with everything I had. And yet, they had never appreciated it. I had been their backup plan, the one they could always count on, but never truly valued. The space felt bigger now. I could breathe easier, but the realization was still sharp. The realization that, in the end, they had seen me as nothing more than a tool, that their love, if it ever existed, had been conditional. As long as I had something to give, they were there. The moment I stopped, they walked out the door. I walked through the rooms, noticing the absence of their things. Jessie's purse left by the door. Chris's jacket hanging over the back of the chair, forgotten. It was like they had vanished, leaving nothing but remnants of their lives here. I walked into the living room again, looking at the space where we'd shared so many family moments. A place that used to feel warm, but now it was cold. And it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel angry or regretful. I felt peace. The kind of peace you can only get when you've reclaimed something you didn't even realize you were losing. I thought of all the years I'd spent bending over backwards for them, the financial support, the emotional support. The years I had sacrificed for Jessie. I had wanted to be the father she could depend on, the one who would always be there. But it wasn't enough. She had never truly seen me for who I was. Not the man who worked hard for his family, not the man who wanted nothing more than to be loved for himself. My mind wandered back to the moment when I had changed my will. When I had made that decision, I had done it out of necessity. But now, standing in the quiet of the empty house, I knew it was the right decision. The only decision. I wasn't a fool anymore. The phone rang suddenly, shattering the silence. I jumped slightly, then smiled to myself, knowing who it was before I even looked at the screen. Michael. My son. The one person who had always treated me with respect, with love that was unconditional. I answered it quickly. "Hey, Dad," Michael's voice came through the line, steady and warm. I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up? I'm doing better now, I replied, sitting down on the couch. Everything's been taken care of. I could hear the slight hesitation in his voice. What happened with Jesse and Chris? I took a deep breath, then explained everything. How I had overheard their plans, how I had changed my will, how I had made sure they couldn't manipulate me anymore. There was a long pause on the other end, and I braced myself for whatever reaction Michael would have. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and full of support. I'm proud of you, Dad, he said quietly. I know it must have been hard, but you did what you needed to do. You've got to look out for yourself now. You don't owe them anything. I smiled, a sense of warmth spreading through me. Thank you, Michael. That means a lot. I'll be down to visit soon, he added. We'll talk more then, but I'm behind you all the way. Looking forward to it, I said, feeling a surge of gratitude. The conversation ended, and I sat in the stillness of the house, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope for the future, hope for a life without the burden of manipulation. For the first time in a long time, I could plan for myself. I could think about what I wanted, not what others expected of me. As I sat there, I realized I was finally free. Free from the weight of Jesse's expectations, free from Chris's manipulations, free from the years of sacrifices I had made for people who didn't appreciate me. I was free to live my life the way I wanted, on my terms. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts as I sat in the quiet of the living room. I glanced at the screen and saw Michael's name. My heart lifted, a small smile tugging at my lips. It had been too long since we'd had a real conversation, one where there wasn't any tension or unspoken things hanging between us. I answered immediately. Hey, Dad, Michael's voice came through the line, warm and steady. I've been thinking about you a lot. How are you holding up? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the past few days sink into my bones. But it wasn't as heavy anymore. It was just a part of the process, a part of moving forward. I'm doing better, I replied. Everything's settled. Michael paused, probably sensing there was more to the story. What's been going on? You okay? I took a deep breath, then filled him in on the past few days. How I'd confronted Jesse and Chris, how I'd changed my will, and how I had finally taken control. Michael listened quietly, but I could feel the relief in his voice when I was done. I'm proud of you, Dad, Michael said, his tone firm. I know it wasn't easy, but you did the right thing. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself now. I had to, Michael, I said, my voice a little more even now. I can't keep letting them take advantage of me. I've spent so many years putting their needs above my own, and look where it got me. I was just a safety net for them. Yeah, he said quietly. I get that. And I've got your back, always. You don't have to do this alone. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was full of understanding, of something unspoken that had always been there between us. I'll come visit soon, Michael added. We can take a trip, go somewhere. You deserve to enjoy life again. Looking forward to it, I said, my smile growing a little wider. We talked for a while longer, catching up on small things. It felt good, lighter, like something inside me had shifted for the better. When we finally said our goodbyes, I felt a calm sense of certainty that I hadn't felt in a long time. Hanging up the phone, I sat there for a while, reflecting on everything that had happened. For years, I'd been manipulated and used, but now that chapter was closed. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was in control of my life. I had made sure of that. I looked around the empty house, and it wasn't as quiet as it had been when Jesse and Chris left. It was peaceful, a peace I hadn't known in years. There was still so much I wanted to do. I hadn't even thought about the future in years, not beyond the next problem or the next thing that needed fixing. But now I was thinking about traveling, about enjoying the things I never had time for. I could finally do what I wanted. I grabbed my planner from the desk and started jotting down ideas. Trips I wanted to take, hobbies I had put on hold, friends I'd lost touch with. For the first time in a long time, I had the freedom to plan for myself. And I knew exactly where I was going. I was moving forward. And for the first time in years, I felt free.